Good evening. I think I'm going to liven up my talks in future and take a leaf out of Eric's books and finish every paragraph with the sentence, also drinks, which I think is... I need one because I actually got rear-ended on the way here on the highway, some lady on her phone. But my car is fine, so everything's good. And this is a thrilling, very exciting night for all of us at Minnesota Opera because you're about to witness the birth of a brand spanking new work of art, and a big work of art at that. And I can't tell you how complicated an opera is, but specifically an opera like this. It has so many moving parts, choruses, orchestras. In a technological presentation like this one, all of the TV footage and the costumes, it's a very, very well-oiled machine already by this point. So it will be a thrilling night in the theatre. So this is the sophomore opera, the second opera by the Pulitzer Prize-winning team of the librettist Mark Campbell and the wonderful composer Kevin Putz. And they had an enormous success with their first opera, which we also premiered, and that was Silent Night. I'm sure you remember it. And it has done the rounds. It's had its European premiere. Our conductor, Michael Christie, has conducted several productions of it already. It just closed in Kansas City, and it is one of the most moving operas that's been written in the last few years. There was a YouTube clip posted recently of the Maestro Cam in Kansas City, and there's this sort of middle-aged lady sitting behind the maestro, and she is just distraught. You can see the tears pouring down her face as someone else gets shot on stage. So it is a powerful team, Mark and Kevin. And this work, I don't know if you've seen either of the films. You probably have. That wonderful black and white movie with the evil Angela Lansbury, the debonair Lawrence Harvey, and of course Frank Sinatra, or the updated version from 2002 with Denzel Washington, Meryl Streep, always power women in these lead roles, and we have one for you in our own homegrown Brenda Harris, and she is spectacular. Or maybe you've read the book on which actually this opera is based. But the wonderful thing about this story and why it's important that we make art is that it has a lot of contemporary resonance. Yes, it's still set in the era, and it's about that sort of fear-mongering of Reds in the Beds, about communism. But for us in our society, with all of these horrible terrorist events, all of this terrible ISIS stuff that's going on, all of the fear and the power and corruption that can be held in big government, it has an awful lot of reflection. It's a mirror for our own times, for our own world. And the story itself, apart from just being a good yarn, will make us reflect on what's going on in our world and what's important that we address. So that's why we make art. It's a mirror of our culture and our society, and this is a particularly gripping tale. And I think it's a new genre in a way. You've been to the opera probably several times, maybe just a couple, but you're used to seeing a good comedy, a Rossini comedy, or say a drama. And we all know what a drama is. It has a specific sort of ebb and flow. There are moments of great tension, maybe there's a death or a murder, or a height of passion in an illicit meeting between the two lovers. And then there are moments of contemplation and reflection. Now that used to be, say in a Handel opera, the synopsis, the plot was propelled with what we would call recitative, that moved the action along. And then there would be arias where the characters would sort of reflect internally on the emotions that those events had brought up in them. So there's always this balance between contemplation and reflection and moving the plot forward. That's how a drama functions. But this is more than a drama, and this is why I think Kevin's music is particularly interesting. This is a thriller. It's based on a thriller. And the difference between a drama with its ebbs and flows of tension and a thriller is that we start with an air of mystery and tension, and that never stops in a thriller. In fact, it has to increase moment by moment until the very final denouement. And that's very hard to do musically. Now, I'm not saying there aren't moments of reflection and contemplation and ebbs and flows. There have to be. There have to be in any opera. We need moments of relief. We can't all be sort of in this state of perpetual tension. But I promise you, this 1 hour, 40 minutes of music will fly by. You will not notice it's happened, because Kevin has succeeded in sustaining that tension. And I can't speak for him, but to my mind, the way he's done it is by using many myriad varieties of one very powerful musical technique. And that's the idea of ostinato. And I think the whole score is based in an endlessly varied way on ostinatos. So what is an ostinato? Let's get into the music so you have some things to listen to. Well, it comes from an Italian word, obviously, everything in music does, that means stubborn. You can compare our English word obstinate. And simply put, an ostinato is any persistently repeated element in music. That could be as simple as a single note, persistently repeated. It could be a sequence of notes, a little melody. It could be a bass line. It could be a chord. It could be a sequence of chords. It could be a rhythmic figure. And they're not unusual in opera. In fact, they've been around for quite some time. So if I take one of the most famous mezzo arias, Dido's Lament, from the end of Dido and Aeneas by Henry Purcell, we have this descending bass line. And that repeats for the whole aria. This descending figure, this element. It's an ostinato, more specifically a passacaglia or a ground bass. When I am laid in earth, may my wrongs create no trouble in thy breast. And that repetition gives it this air of tension and focus. It's almost hypnotic all of the way through. Now, if I take an example from our next opera that's coming up, what about this? It's the Habanera. Rien n'y fait menace ou prière. Et c'est bien en vain qu'on l'appelle, s'il lui convient de refuser rien. And so it continues. And the magical thing about the Habanera, the reason that Carmen's first aria is so hypnotic, is that that note persists for 4.5 minutes of the aria. It never stops. And she keeps descending towards it. But like the tea she is, she then flies away again. You know? And that's why it's such a piece of genius. It's almost minimalist. So there's another ostinato in music. And you're going to hear one at the very beginning of this piece. You're going to hear it in the overture. Ostinato, clearly identifiable. You've got to know that that's an ostinato, and so it builds. The overture is magnificent. You can sense the tension. You can cut it with a knife immediately. So these ostinatos are used everywhere. They're used all of the way through, and he uses them with great variety. So if we think about a monotone, a repeated single pitch, that's wonderful when you're representing someone being brainwashed or hypnotized, when they're turning into programmable robots. You all know the beginning of this story. It takes place in the Ladies' Garden Club of New Jersey. In fact, in the first scene, you have no idea what's going on because of all of these matronly women, and then people getting shot, army officers getting shot. But that's through their eyes. That's what they're seeing. So this creation of the perfect assassin, these Russian and these Chinese spies who have captured them in Korea and are brainwashing these soldiers, produce perfect assassins, programmable robots. And to give the impression of that programmed sense, they sing on a monotone, like anyone who is a robot would. Captain Bennett, Marco, yes, Mom. What will be the first order of business when you return to your command? To recommend that Sergeant Shaw be given the Medal of Honor for destroying an entire infantry and saving all our lives. So this repeated B gives the impression of hypnosis and brainwashing. And this chord that's both major and minor gives us the sense that something is not right in this scene. In fact, it says, something is not quite right is one of the lines in the opera. So there we are, brainwashing, hypnosis with the idea of an ostinato. But an ostinato can be a visual thing. It can be almost onomatopoeic. So in one scene, we're in a press office with this guy called Hoban Gaines, who runs the newspaper, and you'll hear the typewriters. Sense the typing, you know? So there's another ostinato rhythm used visually almost. And then, of course, the characters pick up that idea. $207, pure fiction, Mr. Gaines. Penned by my mother. These repeated pitches, these ostinatos, give us this air of claustrophobia all of the way throughout the score, sustaining that tension. And of course, when the tension is highest, so when he's about to assassinate someone, that repeated note, that single note, is right at the front. And Raymond, the perfect assassin, says, "Good evening, Mr. Gaines. Raymond, what are you doing here? And how did you get in?" So this hypnosis, this ostinato, at the moment of greatest tension comes right to the fore. So there we are. The whole score is built on this endless variety of ostinatos. But he's set himself a problem now. He's created tension. He's got claustrophobia. But the problem with something that's repeated persistently is that it doesn't allow for variety very well. You can see how that might be the case. So he has to vary every other element as much as possible. And he does that beautifully. He varies. The orchestration is magical throughout. We have huge orchestral forces and then almost chamber sonorities, wonderful colors, harmonics in the strings, saxophones, modern instruments, synthesizers, all of these different colors. Huge dynamic contrasts all of the way through, contrasts of articulation and gesture. They're just musical elements. But the thing that we can do nowadays, because we have the internet and we can look up any and listen to any form of music, is we can hark on any style. He can pick up a Baroque quartet, a Sicilienne, at one point in the Act 1 finale. Or he can mimic, say, a piece of Stravinsky, or a piece of Philip Glass, or John Adams. And he does all of this. There are so many different styles. So in the press conference scene, in all of that chaos, we have the Rite of Spring, very recognizably. Then this press conference is adjourned. And all of this, these chords here, and those funky rhythms are clearly Stravinsky. It's clearly Stravinsky that we're hearing to give this chaotic element. Sometimes we're hypnotized again. It's an ostinato, but this is more Philip Glass. We're on a train. It's the meeting of two lovers for the first time. You can see everything rushing past the window. So there's some Philip Glass. At one point we have clearly John Adams. all of those rhythms, those polyrhythms that we call, again with that ostinato underneath. That's John Adams, that's that post-minimalist world. But the wonderful thing about Kevin is that he's not frightened to write theatre music. So yes, he can hark on all of these styles, but sometimes it's just pure theatre, just atmosphere. Nothing cerebral about it, it's just pure good atmosphere. This is a transition. Now, if you heard this in a concert hall, you'd be scared by how atonal and weird it is. But here, because we know film scores, it makes perfect sense. And then it becomes something very recognizable. Oh, say, can you see? Bravo! So where are we now? We're in America, and there's some of the funniest styles that he harks on. We have all of these different pieces of Americana for this wonderfully American opera. So when we open the Ladies' Garden Club of New Jersey, we have what could be a Disney score with a bunch of, you know, those swooping choruses that are always in the background of Sleeping Beauty. You'll hear all of those luscious harmonies. It's like one of those 50s commercials with the perfect housewives, you know? Wonderfully jaunty, wonderfully, it's parody, it's pastiche. And scene 2, we have a Sousa march, clearly. Anyone who played in a marching band is going to recognize that sort of thing. And if you want military pomp and circumstance, a Sousa march is the best way to do it. But sometimes we have slow jazz. This is the bedroom scene. Breakfast scene, I should say, actually. After the bedroom. And indeed, Eleanor Iselin is flirting with her husband. So there's all of those wonderfully jazzy, bluesy harmonies. And my favorite moment, it's actually, the orchestration is utterly fabulous, is at the party at the end of Act 1, and we have this spectacular moment of bluegrass, and you'll hear it. And it goes on like that. It's just it's a spectacular moment of pastiche. So there we are. We have a score, I'm basically out of time, but we have a score that's built on ostinatos to create a new type of opera, a thriller that will sustain you tense to the very bitter end of the story, varied with this wonderful post-minimalist world of eclecticism. We have all of these different styles that we can draw on to create the next great American opera, and that's what I think we've achieved, and I hope very much that you enjoy it as much as we plan to.